Hey folks, my name's Ed Travers. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm an Anglican priest serving in the beautiful parish of St. Margaret of Scotland that sits on the ancestral and on the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people, Gwe. Now, I've covered this before, but we're going to do it again because I talked about this in a live event a few weeks back, and I didn't like how the quality turned out, so I want to offer this again because I think this is one of the most important comments that I've received in the last little while. And by that I mean that it's an important call on the lives of the Christians and the lives of the Church universal. I think the part Christians who don't agree with dominionists don't get and will never get is that it's on you. The ones oppressing in the name of Christianity are on you to change, not us. Not the people Christians oppress, it's on you. Every time I, as a trans person, talk about the oppression I feel from Christianity, the response is, not all Christians, or those aren't true Christians. And quite frankly, so what? If you don't want me to think less of you because you're a Christian, try either leaving Christianity or doing something about those Christians who oppress me. It's not mine to fix. When you don't, all you're telling me is that you don't actually care about all the shit going down, led by Christians, that is attempting a genocide against people like me. Sorry, Ed. I like you and all. But we're dying at the hands of Christians. Please, please, please stop them. See what I mean? Heavy, heavy bit of truth for the church to accept. It's a heavy bit of truth for the church to accept. Now, it doesn't really matter where you find yourself as far as do you believe in same-gender marriage or not, or do you believe if this is a sin or that's a sin. Irrelevant. We're not talking about a theological understanding of a person's life, a theological examination of the quality of a person's life. We're talking about how people in our world feel oppressed by Christians, feel at risk when they're around Christians. People who have been harmed physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually by Christians. Theology is out the window at this point. What we're talking about is how Christians are behaving, how Christians are acting, how Christians are practicing the faith they claim to profess. It's not about theology. So for all those out there that are, well, but this is a sin and that's a sin. No. We're talking about the sin of the church. Because oppressing someone for any reason is sinful on the part of the church and should never happen. Our response to another person should never be harmful, hurtful, cruel, oppressive, and it certainly should never result in genocide. So what are we supposed to do? What are we supposed to do in these situations? It's not all Christians that behave this way. That's a true statement. And I don't believe true Christians would behave this way. That's another true statement. But that does not help the person who is being harmed. That does not help the person who has had a hurtful, cruel experience in the presence of Christians. Those statements, regardless of whether or not they're true, become empty platitudes. First thing we do is we say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that my brothers and my sisters have harmed you. I'm sorry that my brothers and sisters have been cruel, that they've behaved poorly. I'm sorry for what we've done to you. I'm sorry for what my family has done to you. This commenter's right. This is our problem to fix. And the first thing we must do if we're going to fix the problem is accept that it is there and accept ownership of it. Because we can't speak into the lives of these cruel Christians unless we actually acknowledge that they are our responsibility. We won't speak into the lives of cruel Christians unless we acknowledge that they're our responsibility. We've seen this, again, historically speaking, we have seen this time and time and time again, especially over the last century. One church goes off and does its thing and says some things that they really shouldn't be saying, and the rest of us are silent about it. Westboro Baptist is a great example of this. Now more people are speaking out, but when they first got started on their little hate train, nobody stood up and said, hey, this isn't okay. Nobody stood up and said, you must stop. Nobody offered discipline. It's a great word Christians often throw around in the church. There must be church discipline. And that, of course, leads to the next thing. We've got to be willing to stand up. We've got to be willing to stand up, and we have to be willing to offer correction. We have to be willing to offer a new teaching. We have to be willing to re-evangelize. We have to be willing to remind these cruel Christians, these oppressive Christians, these oppressive churches, we have to remind them of who Jesus really is. And while we're reminding them of who Jesus really is, we need to be willing not only to speak to them, but to stand between them and their targets. We need to be willing to wrap their victims in our arms and protect them from the onslaught. We need to be willing to be a barrier between those who are oppressed and these oppressors. We need to be willing to take a punch or two, a kick or two. We need to be willing to be beaten and bloodied by these cruel brothers and sisters of ours in order to protect the vulnerable. I'm sorry. I really am sorry for what my church has done. I really am sorry for what my church is doing. I'll do what I can, when I can, whenever I am able to help. I will speak against these cruel, oppressive behaviors. I will speak against these theologies that lead us to believe we have supremacy over others and a right to harm other people simply because they are different or they live differently or love differently than we do. And when I see violence being offered, when I see others being harmed, I will do what I can to stand between the victim and the assailant. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord's face be made to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord's countenance be lifted up to you. May you always know the peace of being in the Lord's presence. And I pray you will join me. Wherever you are, whenever you see this behavior, whenever you experience this vitriol, I pray you would be willing to stand with our brothers and sisters who are vulnerable. Stand with them and stand in front of them, keeping them from harm. Amen. Nemultus.